Welcome back. Continuing our focus on the fight against corruption, also from the perspective of the Constitution. What can, what is, what should the Constitution do in this respect? Ikazo Akaraiwe joins us this morning. He's the former first Vice President of the Nigerian Bar Association. Morning, and thank you for coming on today.
Thank you.
Well, interestingly, we always do hear that on a regular basis, how, yes, other than the Constitution being the ground norm, but it has a central role, also the judiciary, in this fight against corruption. I mean, I've heard the NBA, I've heard people suggest that if the NBA had even come up, putting its foot forward or putting its foot down, listing some of these areas which they think can be amended from our laws to ensure that at least we have a resemblance of the law being the last hope of the common man. But these are people's opinions here. What do you think about the perspective, the role the law should play in this fight?
I will say that the major thing about the fight against corruption in Nigeria is that the law is basically ineffectual for so many reasons. In fact, the major reason the battle against corruption is not being won is because the law, there's a culture of impunity, majorly because the law is ineffectual. And the reason for this one is the cases take so long in court. The cases take so long.
That's the criminal justice system now.
Yes. We don't have, the entire infrastructure, architecture of justice delivery in Nigeria. The cases take much too long.
Anything about that?
I don't know that we are.
Who should be?
I think there's a lot of talk about it. The NBA has spoken a lot. When I was in office as the first VP, we were beginning to sound like a record that is cracked. We went on and on and on about it. I think JB, who came after us, he went on about it. I'm not too sure what is ongoing now in the NBA about that, but there is a problem. If we had sufficient number of judges, and if the cases could start off and finish in a year, especially the cases that have to do with corruption.
Okay, sorry, let me button. If you say that, the NBA went on about it previously, what exactly did the NBA do at the time?
Well, the major thing the NBA can do is to advocate. And we engaged all the levels of governance. We spoke with Attorney General of Nigeria at the time. We had a series of meetings with him. Every time we had opportunity to address an issue in press conferences and what have you, we spoke about it. I don't know that the NBA can do more than engage and speak. I know we had meetings with the chairman of Judiciary Committee in the Senate, in the House of Reps. Then it was Dixon Siriaki in the House of Reps. I think it is still, I've forgotten now, the man from Sokoto in the Senate. He's still in charge all these years. We can not do much more than advocate and make statements. Are we going to go to court against the government? I don't think so. And if we did that, we may run afoul of Chapter 2, which renders some issues non-justiciable. So the most we can do is to engage. And I know that as one who played an insider role, we did engage. It seems to me as if the executive arm of governance, the executive arm has not seen the relationship between the rule of law and economic development. If they did, they would even be on the driver's seat to push for an increase in appointments of judges. We certainly need much more. In fact, I would say that we probably need as much as 4 times more the number of judges.
One of the things you pointed out was that you weren't quite sure what the NBA, is doing right now concerning corruption. But one thing we do know that we've discussed several times on this program is also corruption in the judiciary. I don't know if you're aware of what the NBA, that there is some form of internal cleansing going on right now within the NBA, at least so says reports. Is there anything you're following along that line?
Well, what I know is that there is some internal cleansing going on within the judiciary. I don't know that the NBA is involved in any
But I know
internal
that
cleansing.
they're taking
and I may be wrong.
petitions against lawyers and, you know.
No, that has been from time immemorial. We've always had legal practitioners disciplinary committee. We've always had that, and even that is ineffectual. It is very ineffective because the sheer numbers of lawyers who are petitioned against and the numbers who are eventually sanctioned, the process is so slow. So we need a complete overhaul, a total overhaul of the disciplinary mechanisms in the NBA. You may have as much as 500 petitions being written, and then you have perhaps 3 or 5 lawyers who are sanctioned in a year. How does that send a message to the people that when you break the laws, that you are going to pay for it? There's nothing that encourages evil than the feeling that there is no punishment for it. That is the problem with the fight against corruption. That is also the problem within the NBA when we're talking about lawyers who aid and abet. Some of these things just drag on and on and on and on and on. And after some time, the public lose track. And then the feeling is that look, corruption is allowed in Nigeria. The culture of impunity is directly linked to the fact that there is a feeling that you can do wrong and get away with it. But if we had a system whereby within a few months, and it's not impossible, these things are not difficult.
Is it just a feeling, or that is what exactly it is? You can actually do it and get away with it.
Yeah. You've said it all. I don't know the percentage, but I do know that it seems to me that a majority of those who break the laws, especially the powerful, we're not talking about the jetsam and the flotsam of society. We are talking about the powerful, the people who have influence. They get away with these things, and therefore we are in a quagmire until we have a political leadership. And I always go back to the leadership. The head is in charge and should show example. Until we have a leadership in Nigeria which decides to tackle headlong the issue of corruption without fear or favor, we will continue to be in this situation where Nigeria is moving from, I think we were once a third world state, but I think we're moving to a failed state status now. You know, on a very serious note. If not for the oil, Nigeria would have failed completely as a state. The oil is the only glue that gives the country a semblance of life.
Would we have had this challenge if we didn't have the oil?
Of corruption?
Yeah.
Yes, we would have, but perhaps on a lesser scale. Because corruption is inherent in the human nature. The human being, even in the Western Hemisphere.
We have not always been like this, have we?
Well, I don't know if we've not always been like this. In 1966, when Nzogu announced the first coup d'etat, the reason for the coup was corruption. I've read his speech. The reason for the coup, except that the scale of corruption, he says that the leaders were taking 1/10 on everything. Now I think that they're taking 9/10. That's
because I think if we had to stay on what Chairman asked, because looking at comments from some leaders, for instance, former President Obasanjo, putting blame on some names he just dropped yesterday. One wonders if truly once upon a time we had people who were so upright in running the affairs of the nation for us to have actually called some names and make others look like they were actually the ones who really worked for the nation, for the good of the nation. But if you can go back as far as early 60s, to say that corruption was also the problem we had then for the first coup, and it means that even after independence, we've always had people who were hell-bent in plundering and steal from the country's fortune.
The way I see it is this, that human nature would naturally be corrupt. And that what stops man, from breaking laws is the fact that you'll be caught. and that you face the music of the law. We've had a president of America who was impeached because he broke the law, Nixon. We've had governors in the US who went to jail because they broke the law. Okay? So it is in the nature of man to want to have his way. And law is what makes us live in a civilized way. So it's not an issue that perhaps in the First Republic, there was corruption. Yes, it's in the nature of man. But the problem with Nigeria is that you get away with it. And I don't think it was always so. In the First Republic, there was a semblance of law and order, because we had just received independence and we're still very much in tune with the British system. The military undermined and destroyed the values of Nigeria. And I've said it again and again that the major reason they did so was because they were not intellectually endowed, sufficiently endowed to rule the country. The quality of men who joined the military in the 50s and 60s, with few exceptions, and Obasanjo is one of the few exceptions because I've read his biography. Ojukwu is another exception, a few others, but the vast majority of them were ne'er-do-wells. They were the guys who couldn't do well in class, in school. They were the guys who failed exams, who were good for nothing, and became our rulers. I hate to mention names, but there's a guy who joined the army as a mechanic, who became the governor of my state. And he retired as general, having been a minister of Abuja. And he left in his wake desolation, destruction, and despair. There is nothing good he left because he didn't have the intellectual endowment to rule. He joined as a mechanic.
So does that mean that...
So the military, so the guys who joined the military were the dregs and the rulers, with few exceptions. Obasanjo is one of the few. I believe he's one of the best people to ever rule our country.
Sir, let's also look at this in terms of intellectual capacity and integrity. They don't always equal one another, do they?
I agree with you. But the point I was hoping to make is the military have been destroyed the fabric of society. They laid a template. I was just about 4 years old when there was the first military coup. And I spent the vast majority of my life growing up under the military way of things with immediate effect, brashness, abrasiveness, rudeness, and corruption, which they allowed. By the time democracy, now if I became a politician and I went into the Federal House of Reps, perhaps in 79, or became a governor, how much of democracy did I know? How much of a culture of accountability had I been raised with? So when you're talking about intellectual integrity, yes, being intellectual does not always equate with integrity, but I'm saying that there's something that has been sown into the psyche of Nigerians.
No, but in spite
it's
of
become
that,
our culture now.
No, but
because those who rule us now, yes.
People were still going to schools, and they were being taught to do the right thing in schools, in spite of the leadership they had at the time. How do we reconcile that?
Education was destroyed by the military. This military governor of my state, as soon as he was appointed the governor in January 1984, the mechanic, and I'm sure you've heard that Abacha was recommended for retirement because he couldn't pass his exams from one rank to another, but the culture of tribalism and mediocrity allowed him to become a general, and you saw what he left for us. This man, when he became the governor of my state, the first thing that man did was to shut down 2 colleges of education. It's too expensive to pay the salaries of the workers. And of course, Ambrose Ali was the governor of my state, had made education completely